Hey there, welcome back to another Rest, Eat, Move podcast. It's Matt and Chris in the studio a couple days before Thanksgiving recording this podcast. Just a reminder, today and the rest of this week going till December 2nd is our November sale. It's our largest sale of the year. We do this once a year. This year we're doing 7% off for 7 days, free shipping, and plus a chance to win this limited edition sweatshirt that I have on, my favorite sweatshirt, OTL sweatsuit, sweatpants, the highest quality sweatpants I think I've ever owned. But the sale is pretty simple, 7% off. You don't have to enter a code, automatic discount for the next 7 days. So check that out. And like always, we're here to help. Questions, answers, customer service. Let Abby or anyone on the team know if we can help in any way. So tomorrow, if you're listening to this, will be Thanksgiving. You're going to have the turkey and the naps and the tryptophan. And it's going to be kind of a sleepy day. Our Lions are going to maybe win for the first time in 7 years on Thanksgiving.
The Lions are on fire.
They haven't won in 7 years on Thanksgiving.
They will win on Thanksgiving.
So a lot going on. We've talked about nutrition, medications, exercise, but it's been a while since we've talked about sleep. We talk about it from a tactic, but we haven't really gone deep in it in a while. So today we're going to talk about sleep time. We're going to talk about this thing that I believe is undervalued. It's overestimated how easy it should be. People think it should be easy. And a lot of people I don't think are willing to change to see the results. And so today we're going to make the argument of why it's worth it. Number 2, how you do it. And number 3, if we don't get busy, we're going to continue to see some of the worst diseases and illnesses because of lack of sleep. And I said that intentionally. The 2 worst diseases most people are fearful of, cancer and brain issues, are directly correlated with the amount of sleep. So how much sleep you get last night?
Well, your mom and I are staying in an apartment, and we actually
somehow I knew this was going to be part of this podcast.
So we're in this apartment, but we've been going to bed very, very early. So I had plenty of sleep last night. I got up at 7, and I woke up to the. You'll talk about a phone, but my phone was ringing, and it was your daughter calling me.
Yeah, get up
at 7:00. So I went to bed around probably 9:30. So I had plenty of sleep last night.
She knew you needed to get up.
She knew I needed to get up, but generally I usually go to bed I start heading to bed around 9:30, 10 o'clock.
Yeah, just to set the table because you're complaining a little bit. So he's moving, but he's in this apartment as you transition to your new place. And you're just not meant for city life anymore.
Well, it's like going back to college.
Sounds fun.
It's a young person's
You turn
game.
67 and you can't even handle a couple weeks in a beautiful
3 weeks in a
beautiful
apartment.
high-rise apartment.
Yes, it's fine. But yeah,
all right,
Silverhouse got a new condo.
So sleep is something that I'll just say to anyone, it's the most protective part of my life. I don't always get to exercise, 3 kids. I don't always get to eat the healthiest foods, stress, work, life, all that stuff. But I don't know. I probably go once or twice a month where I intentionally don't get 8 hours of sleep. Once or twice a month, maybe things are busy or don't feel right and you just get out of rhythm. But only once or twice do I intentionally not prioritize when I go to bed and when I wake up to get 8 hours of sleep. It's like the math equation. I don't know if you have kids or grandkids, but the way they're learning math is I don't understand it. But it's the same when you talk to people about what they expect to get out of sleep. What time do most people have to wake up? It's usually 6 a.m., 7 a.m. on average, something like that. And then you work backwards and say, well, when did you go to bed? And many people say around midnight. And then they look at you like, I don't know why I can't get 8 hours of sleep. The math equation's off from
just a math equation
from the get-go. And
right.
So sleep is so important. So we're gonna try to motivate and enhance why it's important, but talk about some of these issues. Here's my biggest issue with sleep. it's the number one thing you can do to prevent cancer. And it's probably the number one thing you can do to prevent brain disease, neurological disease, Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, MS, type 3 diabetes. Number one. And it's 8 hours of sleep that we're talking about, and yet most Americans sleep 6.5, 6 hours a night. So that's what we're talking about today. Let's jump right into this. What is your relationship with sleep? You talked, I think, the last couple podcasts about, Frito-Lay and working early and working hard and all that impact. But when did you start to see in your clients that sleep is becoming more and more of an issue? Did it happen overnight? Has it always been part of your?
No, it's relatively new, probably in the last 10 years. Again, I'll go back in time when I worked at Butternut Bread, first job out of college. I was getting up I didn't realize this, but I had to get up at 2:30 a.m. And I was doing the math on, I thought I'd be done at 11 a.m.
You paid by the hour.
And I made $19,000 and I was working 80 plus hours. So I was getting home around 6 o'clock at night. But it really hit me that out of the 22 drivers I worked with, only 2 are surviving today. They're all gone. And so really, in the prime of my physical life, I think I was 25 at the time, or 24. Yeah, something like that. 24 maybe. That how I was so not motivated to go to the gym anymore. I just was tired all the time. And so it really hit me that here I am in the prime of my physical life, that I was losing motivation, my first year of marriage. And so that hit me.
Was that a physical job?
Oh, very physical. Yeah, you were running all day long. I had 59 stops and drove 150 miles.
So first, take a pause for a second. So there's a couple of things that are different from probably most people listening to this. I don't think most people are working 80-hour weeks starting at 2 a.m. But many people listening might be sleep deprived. But what is the physical actually exhaustion on top of the mental exhaustion from lack of sleep? Like, is that the double-edged sword here? Is that why?
Well, I think a lot of people too, we're talking about physical. Being physical is another way to help you sleep more. I was just sleep deprived. I just couldn't get enough sleep. Like I was going to
bed.
The
math equation was off.
Yeah,
was impossible.
This is getting up at 2:30, and I was getting home at 6. By the time I ate, it was 7. By the time I took a shower, it was 7:30. By the time I get ready for bed, it's 8:30. I've spent 1 hour with your mom. Okay, I'm in bed maybe by 9 o'clock, and I'm getting up at 2:30. And so then I'm
maximum 5 hours sleep.
Maybe 5 hours, maybe. When in reality, is my body probably.
So I did a little
9
research, and I want to
hours.
throw some stats out there because there's all these. I talked to a gentleman yesterday. You probably talked to 10 gentlemen or women today, like about the same thing. About 0% of society can survive on 5 hours sleep. They actually survive where they're not going to have some type of issue down the road, whether it's brain cancer. Yeah. The way that their brain's optimized, whatever. Less than 1%, and it rounds to 0%. And so we hear this all the time, I only need. But most of the people that say I only need are in their 40s and 50s. And so when you're 24, you were surviving. Like you adjusted to it in some aspects, didn't you?
You adjust to it, but again, if I really could go back, you've heard me talk about this, but if I could go back and see what my testosterone level was, I probably dropped a bunch by the time, I did that job for a year. And I would guesstimate it took me about 6 months to get my sleep back to normal. So yeah, today, as I mentioned, we didn't really see this too much, but now you come in and has your doctor talked to you about your sleep? Well, it's a long conversation. The answer is no. And so I'm seeing more and more, almost every client that I talk to or we do, events, I would say at least 65 to 70% of the audience over age 50 has sleep problems. And I would say it's more than that. So it's a major problem. So and people are not even addressing it.
Everything's a liability. How come if I worked a night shift for a company or if I was delivering butternut bread, why aren't they liable for the deterioration of my health.
Because they're going to put the finger on other variables because it's a variable.
So if I work the night shift, I just find it's going to be very difficult to get good quality sleep.
And everybody knows that they've ever worked a night shift for any length of time. When I worked at GM, I worked the night shift, for an entire summer, and it was, days were mixed up, and it's just is what it is. So, yeah, it's definitely a downside. Certain occupations require that, but any length of time, you're going to really, deteriorate people's health, and that's what we've seen. I think the big thing I hear all the time, I had a gentleman today. If you do the math, what you just did, you did the math. Why are you getting up every day at 4:30 a.m. to work out? So instantly you're going to bed at maybe 10:30. The maximum you're going to get is 5.5 hours. And then we have this conversation. Do you sleep all?
If you got great sleep
If
hygiene.
you're perfect sleep, you're getting 5 hours. Well, you're not. Nobody's getting perfect sleep. So then now you're probably closer to 3.5 to 4 hours. And then, you come off of having a heart attack, last spring. So my point is this, is that in fact, I said to him today, I said, one of the huge benefits you had in your life is you had a heart attack. And I said, this is probably a gift that you got.
Forced to change.
And the more we talked about it, he realized that it stopped him in his tracks. And if it didn't stop him in his tracks, then maybe you had a worse outcome.
Sure.
So now he has an opportunity to change his life, the rest of his life. He's 60 years old. That's pretty cool. So I think that's what we have to start waking up. Like, wake up. Are you kidding me? You think you...
Actually, don't wake up.
Yeah. Do you
wake
really
up to
think
sleep
that...
so you can sleep.
Yeah, so you said it right at the very beginning, is that most people, number one, aren't even aware. And number two, they tell themselves they don't require it. And so that's what I hear in my age group, is I just don't need as much sleep anymore. Well, if you want to have a healthy brain, you do. If you want to have a healthy gut, you do. So if you want to have healthy hormones, because that's what I see every day, that's what you see every day. I mean, I've never seen such low testosterone levels for both men and women.
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing a couple things. Again, I said this last time. We get going on this topic, and these topics we pick are pretty big. We try to go narrow, but like, I get a guy that we've both talked to, and we love this guy, and he's been a customer and a fan. But there's a disconnect. There's a blind spot. And the blind spot is, I'm going down a bad path. Numbers aren't looking great, but I feel okay. And if you have a good attitude and you're kind of a grinder, you can feel okay.
Mm-hmm.
But when some of these numbers are showing up, it's telling us there's a huge gap, blind spot, whether it's nutritionally or sleep. And so this guy I was talking to is talking about these numbers, and I said the only way those numbers can be like that is if you're not getting enough sleep. The only way. I don't have to be your doctor, your physician. I don't have to be a molecular biologist with these fancy degrees. The fastest way to change your hormones is to start to screw with your sleep. The fastest way to improve your hormones is to get better quality sleep. So a question we get all the time, Matt, how do I increase my testosterone? Or for women, maybe it's balancing testosterone or increasing it, or balance whatever hormones we're talking about. And the answer will always be sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So in 2013, when you wrote On Target Living and Wiley wanted you to publish the book, we kind of rushed it out the door. We tried to write it as fast as we could. We talked about sleep and we talked about things, but we didn't establish the rest part of rest, eat, move at that time.
Correct.
And I remember we went on a retreat and I talked to the team and I said, we got to kind of coin this, because people ask, well, what's the presentation about? And you need something quick. And so we came up with Eat, Rest, Move. And it just flew. It kind of comes off the tongue. People to this day say Eat, Rest, Move. And I said to the team, I'm going to fight you on this, but that's not the right sequence. This right sequence is rest, eat, move. And we've talked about kind of swimming uphill, swimming up the stream.
Yep.
I think people are saying, well, what do I have to eat to increase my testosterone? What do I have to do to eat to protect my brain? How much exercise? And at the end of the day, their blind spot is, but they're not getting enough sleep. You're never going to be your most optimal self getting 5 hours of sleep ever. Less than 1% of society has the genetic mutation. Yeah, a lot of people think they have the genetic mutation. You know, Matthew Walker wrote the book, Why We Sleep. It got people interested. He did the TED Talk. But he talks about very, very unlikely that you're one of those people that can handle less than 5 hours of sleep. So it's important.
Yeah, that's
Rest, Eat, Move is kind of the name
Yeah.
of our podcast because you can't leapfrog.
But think about this for a minute. So when you're doing your presentations or, we're doing consults and things like that, what they want, like if you did, let's just say personal training anywhere, rarely does a client want to talk and sit down about talking about their sleep. They want to go in the gym, get their workout, see what their heart rate variability is. They want to see all that. Well, reality is, let's put that in the corner. What's really going to be impactful is having you really prioritize your sleep and the amount of rest you get. If you don't get that right, you're never going to be right because your nervous system's out of balance. If your nervous system's out of balance, back to cancer, you're not going to have that good hazmat suit, which is the immune system.
Well, and I'll throw a word out, glymphatic system. So we've talked about lymphatic system, or maybe you're like, I don't even know what that means. Lymphatic system is the sewage, takes out the trash in the body. Doesn't have a pump.
It's a sewer system.
Sewer system in the body. Lymphatic system. Well, the brain has this thing called the glymphatic system that only comes out when you sleep. And so that's how you prevent cancer and these beta amyloid plaques and these toxins in the brain. So we have this sewage system beautifully orchestrated in the cerebral fluid and all that stuff, but it only happens when you sleep.
Especially during REM sleep.
Especially during REM sleep. So I think these are all these interesting things to value it. But number one is I have this slide, and I have the Chevy Chase Christmas, or it's actually Griswold family vacation where he's sleeping in the
car while he's driving.
And I get people to kind of laugh, but then I say, I think we don't plan our sleep. We expect to sleep, but we don't plan our sleep. And when you think about the expectation as a society that we deserve to get 8 hours of sleep, yet we have horrible sleep hygiene. Not the right temperature. It's not dark enough. We got these illuminated clocks. You're looking at your phone in your bedroom. Maybe you ate the wrong food. Maybe you were falling asleep on the couch watching Netflix or a show. And then you just expect it. And it's not the mattress's fault. It's not that you're not wearing enough wearables. It's really we just haven't set ourselves up. Have you been outside and got real sunlight?
Right.
Because I don't think if we put you in a tent in the middle of the mountains that you're going to really not get good quality sleep. Like you can't look at your phone. You're just naturally going to fall asleep. But I think we've hacked this for so long that now it's becoming.
Well, and I think you kind of said it. Like it doesn't happen yet. It's been a process.
Yeah.
You build up these habits, and sometimes I ask my clients, "How did this begin?" Because if you have young kids, Kristen just had a new baby girl. You're not going to allow your kids to go to bed at midnight and be on their phones while it's not going to happen. So if you're trying to get an infant to sleep well, you do everything in your power to protect that sleep schedule. And as an adult, I can't tell you how many times, and you've had this forever, is that tell me your plan around sleep. There is no plan. When do you go to bed? Well, it varies.
And they want us to move off of it because they want to talk about nutrition or exercise.
Like,
or
hey,
something.
tell me how do I get my gut healthy? Well, if you don't have a good, healthy nervous system, you can't have a healthy gut, which is going to lead to you're not going to produce enough melatonin because serotonin makes melatonin. It's just they don't know that, and then the next thing you know, wow, sleep's really important.
Last podcast we were talking about how did we get here, and so I can look at someone's blood work and I can tell them if they're not sleeping. I mean,
right.
Like. What people want us to tell them, specifically testosterone, it's as low as it's ever been in males, ever.
Male and females.
And female.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a real big issue.
Right.
You look at that and they want you to say, well, if you just take this supplement, you can increase it. No, the way that you increase it the fastest, the most
Well,
naturally.
and again, I talked about this last time, but I had a gentleman a few weeks ago. His testosterone level at 41 years old is 218. And at 41, he should probably have 800 plus testosterone. Well, the first thing they do is he's going to go to the doc, and the doc refers him out. And the next thing you know, he's coming back with, 200 milligrams of injectable steroids to help him raise his testosterone. So he's got his T levels are back up, and now he's starting to think, well, my headaches disappear, and well, it's beginning. Why do you have such low testosterone? Because you're not getting enough sleep. So I think we're not connecting the dots. And if you go there and ask for this problem and have this issue, you're going to be medicated on a sleep medication, or if your hormones are out of whack, here comes when reality is we're not talking about the basic fundamental for health is the rest, that's the hierarchy. It's the breathing, it's the sleeping, it's the space, it's the pace, it's all that kind of stuff. You got to get that right first.
Yeah, and so we got chronic fatigue in our society, and so I'll do one other thing, and then we'll go into how do we change this. What are some things we do? But as someone that struggled with ADHD or told I was ADHD, or however you want to categorize it, anyone can make the decision on what they thought of my attention. The symptoms of ADHD are irritable, moodier, distractible, unfocused, and they're almost identical to lack of sleep. So it's an interesting thing when you think about meds. Again, Matthew Walker, I think, illustrates this, and he's one of the top researchers on sleep. And so he's looking at it from all different angles. And he writes, and I thought this was interesting, the bad, and the ugly about sleep medications. But he's talking about ADHD, and they look identical. Yet if your child, or even you, go into the doctor and say, I'm irritable, I'm moodier, I'm distractible, unfocused, the first thing, unfortunately, is they think that you might have ADHD. Yet we didn't ask, is your child sleeping 8 hours, or what's the average amount of time a child should be sleeping, between 10 and 12?
It depends on, the infants are 14 to 17.
Yeah, so we all sleep different amount of time.
Teenagers are, 9 to 13, 14.
But is that even part of the conversation? So then you look and say, well, what are these two meds that treat ADHD? Adderall and Ritalin. They're two of the most powerful drugs to prevent sleep. To prevent sleep. And so we didn't ask about sleep. It looks pretty similar to sleep. Not saying that people don't have ADHD and it's always sleep related. But if we don't think about it that way, this gentleman that comes in and says his T's low, it's not the T, it's the sleep. It may not be the ADHD, it may be the sleep. It may not be the gut allergicness of gluten or inability to break it down. It may be that you're not getting enough rest to digest. That is what happens during sleep. A big part of is it flushes out everything so you can start over, renew for the day.
And it renews not only your body, but it renews your mind.
So I just thought that was interesting. For many kids, the last thing they need is lack of sleep. And the two drugs that are really, we just had a shortage of Adderall. Still might be. For most part, the last thing that child needs is a drug to prevent them from sleep. And so
if you make it simple for the kids, if you get them to move, you feed them halfway decent, and then you make sure they get enough rest, they're probably going to function pretty good for most kids.
Or better.
Yes.
So anyway, those are some of the important part of sleep. But again, I'll mention this. The number one preventer of anything for cancer, of anything you do, is 8 hours sleep.
It's because it's all based on the nervous system, immune system.
And then you get the glymphatic system, and then it protects our brain. And then you realize, I really do need 8 hours of sleep. And I'll make one last point. The reason why you don't need 6 and you need 8 is because the last 2 hours of an 8-hour period, you get the most amount of rapid eye movement. And so we have these 4 stages: stage 1, stage 2. Stage 2 is where we spend the most time. Stage 3 is deep sleep, where the body repairs itself. Think about inflammation, hormones, recovery. And then rapid eye movement is where the brain recovers and flushes. And so you want to go through all of these. And so if you shortchange yourself and get 6 hours, you get very little rapid eye movement.
And as you know, as you go through the cycles every 90 to 110 minutes, as the night goes on, you spend more and more time in stage 4. That's when you're dreaming. That's when you have more brain cleaning. Because if you're not getting into that closer to the, I only need 4 hours, you don't have much REM sleep the first 4 hours a night. So that's the big problem.
And that leads us to 1 in 10 Americans over 65 has Alzheimer's. I mean, we're going to live to 90. So 65 is still 20.
65. Why are you picking on 65?
65 is still 25 years from 90. So there's a lot of years.
That.
There's a lot of, you're a couple years past that. Anyway, so let's talk about how do we improve sleep. And I like to make it simple. I think there's 2 challenges with sleep. Number 1, I can't fall asleep. Number 2, I can't stay asleep or maintaining sleep.
Well, let's just back up one more here. I think what you've mentioned a long time when I've heard you speak, but number 1, the first thing that I always try to get people to do is, do you value it? And number 2, do you plan it? And then from there we can get specifics on those things. But if you don't value it and they don't have that awareness, you can talk all day long. So that's the first thing I always try to do with everybody is like, hey, tell me a little bit about your sleep and what value do you place on it? And then after that, I follow up to tell me your plan about your sleep. What does it look like? Walk me through that. And it's shocking that most of them don't have a plan. And they, like you said, when you look at the time, how long do you sleep? Everybody overestimates how much they sleep.
And if we made it simple of what actually happens in sleep, no one would say, I'm going to sacrifice that.
Yeah, I would never. If I want to be a better performer, Usain Bolt, LeBron James, the list goes on, all the top athletes, they prioritize sleep.
Kindness, like I said, irritability, moodiness, distractibility. These things are, if you really looked at them and said, what is actually happening during sleep? It's something that you'd protect.
And then the other thing, too, we've done this before, and you talk about this with my dad, your grandpa, but you never know how good you could feel. So imagine it's the springtime. You're in the mountains of Colorado. You get in the 9 hours of sleep. You've been in the fresh air. You've eaten vibrant, healthy foods. You're moving your body. You feel incredible. But again, it all begins with, are you getting enough sleep?
Yeah, and that's where we are today. So again, let's talk about the couple ways that you can improve sleep. I like to go right, and you can fill in the blanks of the areas, but I like to keep it real simple and clean because I think at the end of the day, I want people to do 1 or 2 of these things, and it would drastically improve their sleep. The biggest one, and I'm shouting this from a mountaintop lately, is I can't fall asleep. Well, that's the same reason that you can't stay focused. We're overstimulated. Once upon a time, which wasn't that long ago, about 15 years ago, we didn't have a phone in our bedroom. 15 years ago. Just look at the sleep stats then. Look at the sleep apnea and the snoring and the insomnia and all these issues. It wasn't as bad. In 15 years, it's drastically changed. So can you go 30 minutes before bed and 30 minutes after you wake up without looking at your phone?
Okay, that's going to be a tough one. Not for me, but I know what you're saying. You say this to the crowd. So what does the crowd say when you do this?
Well,
do they give you a pushback?
94% of the crowd charges their phone in their bedroom. So it's an addictive.
Is it really that high?
Yeah, probably closer to 95.
They charge it in their bedroom.
Yeah, it's the clock. It's the alarm clock.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I can't, I have 3 kids, and so the only phone we have in the house is the cell phone. A couple friends of mine created this box, this thing where you charge your phone in the box. I think it's a good idea. They've kind of morphed the business because it didn't catch on. It's more of an app now to see how much time you don't spend on your phone. So it's like the reverse of screen time.
I like that.
Yeah.
You don't spend on the phone.
But I have this box in my kitchen where it kind of creates a boundary. Like, let me just charge my phone overnight in this box. Because when you charge it next to your bed, you wake up at 2 a.m., it's tempting to open it up, see what the score of a game is.
Yeah.
Check an email. When I'm traveling, it's hard. It's like, where am I going to charge my phone? In the bathroom? And I'm by myself. And so I can see how it becomes a safety blanket.
Yeah, and the next thing you know, that's the habit. Here's the habit.
It's a habit. So I think what we have to do is we have to really create that boundary.
Okay, I like
30
that.
minutes before bed, try to not look at your phone. And it starts with picking your bedtime. If you're going to bed at 10, 9:30 is when the last time you can look at your phone. Now, the other thing is, Matt, I use it as a clock. I wake up in the middle of the night and I go to the bathroom, and sometimes I want to know what time it is. You wake up and you're like, is it midnight? Is it 6? You kind of want to know that so you can fall back asleep. So I invest in this alarm clock that it's kind of a dumb alarm clock. It's called a smart alarm clock, but it's very low light. It doesn't have much technology to it. And if you want to use the alarm clock, it wakes you up very gradually.
Right. It's just a tone.
So, but the light of the alarm clock is very light, so it doesn't disturb your sleep. So 30 minutes before I go to bed, not looking at my phone. The bigger one, the more important one, it kind of sets your nervous system for the day, is I'm not checking my phone 30 minutes after I wake up. Can you go to the bathroom? Can you get water? Can you take a shower without
just kind of
checking your phone?
gradually enter your day.
Yeah, and the reason why is because most of what you're going to look at is negative. The news, the stock market, maybe it's positive, but it's very reactive.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're already getting controlled. You're already being used by this tool versus you using the tool.
So this is an easy. I don't
simple.
I don't think it's easy, but very simple. I like that.
If you're listening to this, the thousands of people that listen each week, 95% of you won't do this. It just is the truth.
But if you're trying to get a better night of sleep, if you took a couple big things away, I think this would be a big one.
This is the biggest to fall asleep, I think,
mm-hmm.
because we're overstimulated. We all get tired. We have chronic fatigue,
mm-hmm.
and so what happens is we skip this circadian rhythm. We delay it, or we get it out of balance, and so we get tired. But our society, most of us can't go to bed at 9. We have too much to do or finish up or think about, or whenever we were meant to go to bed, and so we have to stimulate, whether it's phones or games or getting work done.
Well, I think you said this earlier. 15 years ago, you didn't have your phone in your bedroom.
You couldn't do it.
And then in 1879, the light bulb was invented. We were sleeping 10 plus hours. So if you really go back in history of human beings, this has been a really relatively short little window.
Yeah,
and now we're better asked better questions. Why are we not sleeping?
So from 2007-ish till today, we've increased screen time from 0, phone screen time. Well, let's just say less than an hour. Maybe you're texting.
Mm-hmm.
You weren't on social media. You weren't doing sports betting. You weren't playing games.
Yeah, that's nuts.
So we're going from 0 to 5 hours today, screen time.
Or a lot more.
And our sleep time went from about 7.5 to less than 6.5. So we've lost about an hour and 15 years.
I just don't think people are even sleeping 6.5.
Yeah, I mean, it's all dependent on a survey.
Mm-hmm.
That's the challenge. But anyway, those are the two things to fall asleep is we're overstimulated.
Got it. Okay.
So we gotta remove that stimulation.
Get that phone out of the bedroom 30 minutes before, 30 minutes,
And challenge yourself.
After.
Do you really have to charge your phone in your bedroom?
No.
And are you really?
No.
Is it really that? People say, well, what if there's an emergency? We've handled emergencies for a lot longer without a phone.
Well, and the other thing too, you can have that communication. Then if you need to get a hold of me, call me.
There's a lot of different ways.
There's lots of different ways. Do whatever, but you can always call. The phone's on, just not in my bedroom.
So that's a big one. So that's where I kind of focus. The temperature. You have to your body temperature has to drop 2 to 3 degrees to fall asleep. So making sure that the environment's right. That's why a cool environment's easier to fall asleep in than a hot
one of the things
environment.
you said earlier too, people are having trouble falling asleep, but you got to ask the question. So what makes you fall asleep?
Yeah, melatonin.
So if you look at, so what is melatonin? Sleep hormone made in the gut. Serotonin is a raw material that makes it, neurotransmitter in the gut. So again, gut.
Yeah, if you're not eating carbohydrates, you're not going to be able to make
Yeah, you're not making melatonin. And again, you got this amazing focus, but you can't relax. So then the other question I would ask is, what's the opposite of melatonin?
Opposite of melatonin.
What's the opposite of melatonin? That would be cortisol.
Oh.
So cortisol is going to make you
Stay
awake.
awake.
So as the night goes on, our melatonin levels come out to play when the sun goes down. And then as we get closer to 5 a.m., cortisol starts coming up,
Sure.
and that's what wakes us up.
Sure.
Well, if that's the opposite, and we're stimulating cortisol before we go to bed, it's just the opposite of what we should be doing, right?
And that's why you maybe wake up in the middle of the night after you
And
get
like
a little
Dr.
bit of
Phil
sleep.
Nierenberger always says, is you're going to bed disturbed, and people say, well, I'm not disturbed. Well, you're kind of disturbed, not maybe negatively, but your body is not getting into the position it should be.
Yeah, you got your hand on the emergency.
You got your
button.
hand on the cortisol, and the cortisol is keeping you awake. And it's going to take a while before the cortisol gets out of the system and the melatonin comes back in the system. So now I got to take melatonin. No, you don't. We just got to rewire this thing and get your nervous system.
Two supplements you should never take: melatonin and calcium. They're
just
not doing what you're even trying to do.
Right. So
I think those are the ways to fall asleep, and the environment's important. Now the bigger one, and the one that's really impacting people's, I think, sleep more than the other one. I think people are falling asleep for the most part. Sometimes people can't do either.
But they can't stay.
Is they're not being able to stay asleep, and so 2-3 a.m. they wake up. Maybe they went to the bathroom and they can't fall back asleep. They were disturbed, and then they woke up, and then they start having these, I got to solve this, or let me go
cerebration, the brain starts speeding up.
So the sign there is that we're deficient in the right minerals to keep us relaxed, specifically magnesium. And so that's where we start to look at diet. So number one way to get magnesium versus a supplement is through food. Chia seeds, dates, raisins, bananas. Just Google foods high in magnesium. And number two is you can get magnesium absorbed through the skin, whether it's Epsom salts or bath salts or even bath salts with some essential oils. Foot tub, soak your feet 20 minutes, cup of Epsom salts. Maybe you want to do a real bath, a little bit more Epsom salts, less time. So those are some ways to really get magnesium in the system to stay asleep. And then I think the temperature is a big deal.
Temperature is huge.
We're too hot, or we just don't have the right environment. And we're starting to realize, and I was listening to this podcast, this quick one on sleep, and we now know even a little bit of light really disrupts our cells when we're sleeping. And that's what it's all about. And so really making sure it's as dark as possible.
It's a cave.
It's a cave.
Turn it into a cave.
Yeah, and so maybe you can feel like you stay asleep, but there's actually some more depth to what your body stimulates or is a.
It's funny. Back in the day, Kathy and Berger had a place at Wildwood up north at Walloon Lake, and we would sleep. And I remember you guys as kids would sleep in the basement. There was no windows. I don't even know if it's a legal today. There's no egress windows, but whoever slept in the basement, you slept like a champ because there was no light, zero light. There was no phones.
It was cool because basement.
It was cool. It was very cool. So my thing always was, if I went up north and could stay with Berger and Kathy at the condo, I'd always want to sleep in the basement because you'd have this incredible sleep. And it's no different than we're at Douglas Lake. Many times the windows are open. It's cold. We're up north. There's no light besides, you're in the woods, and all that stuff makes a difference.
Yeah, when in college, I had an apartment. It had no windows. I mean, you'd go to bed, and you'd do some things that you probably shouldn't do to improve sleep, and you wake up, feel actually better than ever. Because, the light is a big deal.
Light's a big deal, and temperature's a big deal.
So those are a couple big deals, and then sound, whether it's a sound machine or... Lately, I've been trying to not rely on a sound machine. I like it. It helps me sleep. But I think sometimes a little bit too much stimulation, even with some of the softer sounds.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, like if some people are looking at a sound machine, you really, like you said, you got to kind of play around with that. And it shouldn't be so distracting. It should be so gentle that you're allowing you to relax. The other thing, too, that I have a heavy blanket. And the heavy blanket, when it's cold out, is incredible. So when it's cold out, middle of the night, I bring the heavy blanket on. It's like you're in a little cocoon. So if you've never tried a heavy blanket before, they have Barabee, the one I use. We have no affiliates with that. But I think it's really a powerful tool that you can use if you're looking for different ways to improve your sleep. But the heavy blanket definitely was cold.
Get the temperature down if you can, and those are again, it's actually pretty simple.
But I think light's probably one of the greatest things. That and temperature, those are the two things I focus on.
Yeah, I mean, I do have a TV in my room, but anything that has a light, I cover it, I block it.
It's like when we go to the hotels when we travel. There's so much. I go, everything's so distracting. I'm like, you're not trying to get good sleep in a hotel room.
Yeah, I mean,
it should be, but that's not the case.
We become such a nitpicky, but like there's a gap in the door and like the hallway light.
I'm using every towel, covering everything. There's no light.
Yeah, and then we stayed at that wooden hotel 2 weeks apart. Had no idea we stayed at the same hotel that was haunted. Things are leaking and sure.
Was that in San Diego? Yeah. I remember that.
So again, it's pretty simple things, and then let's go a little bit nutritionally, and let's talk movement, and then we'll wrap this up. But nutritionally, one of the biggest issues is like we're trying to hack our health, and then next thing you know, our sleep gets disturbed, but we don't even realize until it's too late. So let's just say I go on the ketogenic diet. I heard about it. I got to lose a couple pounds. It seems simple. But if you don't eat carbohydrates, you don't really stimulate serotonin. You don't stimulate serotonin, it's the precursor to melatonin. You're not able to fall asleep.
Right.
You're going to be overstimulated because you're hot. You're running too hot.
Body's too acidic.
Amino acids, acid, too much acid. So what you eat matters. And then you got some foods that are calming, cooling, and you got foods that are hot and stimulating.
Yeah,
and
the whole yin and the yang.
Yin and the yang.
It's important.
So I think food is a really big deal. Caffeine's a really big deal.
Well, back to your gut for just a minute. So one of the things I try to always do is like when we get talking about the nervous system and rest and whatever, I'm going to really jump into the gut and say, okay, we talked about rest and nervous system stress, but now we got to understand the power of the gut, because that's where your sleep's going to live, is in the gut. They're not connecting that. So then these are some meals like the oatmeal on the run or whatever. These are meals that really will help your gut health. And so in the Rest, Eat, Move book, if you were looking for something for the holidays, page 125, there's a gut biotic chart, prebiotics, probiotics, symbiotics. And that helps the gut be healthier. But again, people are not aware that, you hear a lot about microbiome and the gut health, whatever. What the reality is, that's what's going to help you sleep better. Because if you don't have a healthy gut, you're not going to sleep.
Yeah. I mean, okay, here's what we're going to do. You're going to have 5 beers and a whole pizza. You might fall asleep, but you might have a gut ache. You're not going to stay asleep.
Mm-mm.
And that's a good reminder about alcohol. Alcohol is so misunderstood when it comes to sleep. Sure, it's a sedative.
Yeah.
It helps you actually relax and unwind and maybe just kind of like fall asleep. But it does not. It actually does the opposite. It prevents you from getting quality deep sleep. And so we're seeing this as people age, and then maybe they want to have a cocktail or two. It's like this ticking time bomb of bad sleep.
Yeah, we're not saying you shouldn't drink alcohol, but understanding you're not going to get the same quality of sleep. It's that simple.
It's that simple. And so instead of saying, well, should I have a glass of red wine or a cocktail every night? The answer is no, if you care about your sleep.
If you want to have better sleep.
So
Correct.
The question is, let's pick really wisely. Back to that 80-20. I mean, 80-20 is 2 nights a week. Maybe I can have a couple cocktails. Maybe.
If that's, but again, as you know, the less you drink.
Versus 5.
Yeah, the less you drink, the more sensitive you become. And so now I'd rather sleep. I really cherish my sleep.
But we're seeing that a lot. And how I open today is, okay, Matt, my testosterone's 200. Or if I'm a female, maybe it's 25,
9,
30, 9.
10.
Doctor wants to put me on some other medications, sleep aids. I have this, I have that. Okay, well, tell me about your alcohol. Well, I have a glass of red wine every day.
Yeah, and the other thing.
What time are you waking up? Well, I'm going to see a trainer at 5:30.
Talk about sleep apnea just for a second before we,
Yeah, again, I've been researching more and more of this. I've talked about it before, but more people my age. I'm 38. I mean, it just boggles my mind have sleep apnea. Sleep apnea is not necessarily just snoring. It's when you stop breathing or you breathing.
It's a major problem.
Yeah, it's a major problem. And so it can be deadly. And so you want to address it as a sleep problem. And the way you treat it for the most part is a CPAP machine. It's going to open up your airways, put oxygen so you don't stop breathing. The thing that I'm trying to research is if that was such a great thing, we would all have a CPAP machine. We know that that's not going to be as good quality of sleep as a great sleeper that doesn't have sleep apnea, that doesn't use a CPAP machine.
Right.
But when you look it up and you say, okay, what's the number one cause of sleep apnea? It's weight. It's being overweight. I mean, if you think about it, if you put a lot of pressure on your diaphragm because of excess visceral fat or maybe even on your neck,
Sure.
you can't breathe. You know, Boji's in here right now sleeping like a ton of bricks. If I pull down his collar right now, he's not going to be able to stay asleep. He can't breathe as well.
Right.
So snoring's a whole other thing.
Again, the CPAP could be a tool, but you got to recognize that something's out of balance.
So here's your choice. You go to the doctor, and the doctor may not even ask you about your weight. You go to see a sleep specialist and say, I can't sleep. I have sleep apnea. I've done the sleep studies. They're probably not even going to talk to you about weight loss. What would be a...
Not going to talk to you about gut health. They're not going to talk about daily movement, getting outside, getting sunlight.
Think about this. What would be the expertise of a sleep doctor's experience with lifestyle changes around weight loss? Unless they did it for themselves or had their own interest. It'd be zero. They probably have never taken a nutrition course. They probably don't understand fully the gut microbiome and the connection to sleep. What they do is they research sleep. They understand the therapeutics, the drugs. And so I'm not saying that these are bad people, the wrong people. You just have two routes. The first route is understanding what's the source of the problem. Or the other route is I just don't have time to go after the source of the problem and I need some solutions.
Let me throw another one out there. So let's just say I'm not sleeping, or I'm not sleep. I don't know why you go to sleep specialist because you're not sleeping. So what would they? I'm just being naive here. So if I'm not sleeping, I'll go to a sleep specialist. What are they going to tell me if I do a sleep study?
Well, again, think about how long it's going to take. You're going to go to your general practice doctor. Let's just say you're 50 years old and you haven't had a physical in a while. It's probably been 2, 3, 4 years of this issue, unmanaged, untalked about.
Yeah,
then you go to the general doctor. Doctor says, "How you doing?" "Well, doc, I'm not sleeping very good." "Okay, tell me about it more." "Oh, this doesn't sound very good. I'm going to get you into a specialist." "Well, they can't see you for 3 or 4 months."
I'm going to do a sleep study.
And then I'm going to do a sleep study. I got to schedule it. I got to put the mask.
But what is a sleep study going to tell you?
It's going to tell you, do you have sleep apnea or do you snore?
But again, so what is it going to tell me?
It's going to tell you that you have a chronic disease of sleep.
It's going to tell me that I don't sleep well. So now I'd go back to, is it who's on first, what's on second?
Here's what it's not going to tell you. Again,
I'm just being the devil's advocate here. I'm like, what would it tell you? It tells me I'm not sleeping. So then what would be the answer to help you sleep better?
Let me give you one other thing, and before we go down in this whole rabbit hole, and we might have to do round 2. I go to see my physical therapist for my leg issue. And you have to rate on the scale from 0 to, 100 or whatever. It's kind of a funny scale. Your pain. Does it prevent you from sleeping? Does it prevent you from working? Does it prevent you from doing what you do in life? My scale's always 0, but I'm still there trying to solve the source of the problem. You go to a sleep study, you're at 100. You're way past first base. So yeah, they're designed to help you, because 110 is you're gonna die. If you have sleep apnea untreated, you could.
We're not saying that at all. We're not saying not to treat it. We're not saying, but again, back to the sleep study, like you said, you're way past this.
You're way past this, and if you haven't done the other stuff, that's all we're trying to say is, if I'm trying to build a house, I'm not putting the roof on, but I guess if you got a couple foundational poles, you can create some shelter, but it's not how I would build the house.
Yeah, I mean, the big wind comes up, here goes your roof.
Yeah, so again, at 35 years old, 25 years old, 30 years, if you're starting to go down this path and you expect to live to 90 with a healthy brain, we're just not setting ourselves up. If you want to retire, you got to have investments. You got to save.
You're right.
So that's the thing. And then the last thing is exercise. Imagine if you go and get a sleep study and the doctor says, how's your nutrition? Great. That'd be a great thing if they asked, are you doing X, Y, and Z? But are you moving your body? And the truth is only 80 or 12%, 17% of society is moving their body on a regular basis. So we know that that's an opportunity.
Getting outside, getting sunlight while you move. Yeah.
Those are the areas that we see misunderstood, because you look at this book, a couple books that I find are very interesting in society, Why We Sleep. Recommend everyone read it that's interested. The Breathe book by James Nestor. But let me summarize both of these. Number one, you need sleep, and there's some simple things to improve sleep. You don't need to know the science.
Right.
Breathing. You can control how you breathe. And breathing leads to better sleep. That's why sleep apnea or snoring is a problem. If Dr. Phil was in that seat that you're in, he would tell you if you're snoring, and he used to be a snorer, you're not breathing correctly.
Correct.
And you actually can change that. So you could say, well, I'm just a snorer. Well, there's a reason. Again, back to the 1%, there's 1% that have some anatomical,
some
conditional,
blockage.
blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Most of the time it's weight, lifestyle,
Right.
nervous system, your habits. How strong is your diaphragm? Is your diaphragm working when you're sleeping? Is it even able to? I mean, you put a keg on your diaphragm, it's
Right.
not going to be able to work.
Well, think about when, especially men, many times when they drank too much alcohol, their snoring goes way up. You got to start asking, well, why is that, right?
Sure.
Or if I'm snoring, maybe I've gained 10, 15, 20 pounds or whatever, and it's not just for men, but it's women too. But again, I go back to that sleep study. That's not going to, it can tell you, but you're going to go back to the beginning of what do you have to do. Am I getting daily movement? Am I getting outside? Am I getting sunlight?
So the takeaways, here's the 3 takeaways. Number 1, we need less stimulation. So if we want to calm down at night, it's like anything. You wouldn't let your kids I'll take this back. You wouldn't let your 5-year-old kid have a cell phone in their bed.
Never.
Okay? You wouldn't let your 5-year-old kid have a cocktail. And I'm being funny, but you wouldn't let them have a cocktail or sugared cereal
Or energy drink or
right before bed. You would want your kid to get out and get some fresh air, move their body,
sunlight.
It's so very simple. And then next thing you know, you're not prioritizing it and you don't have the habits to do it.
And the habits start to go sideways.
To improve sleep, it's really 3 parts. Are you calming the mind down a little bit? The rest piece. Are you breathing? Are you giving yourself some breaks?
In that first piece here, I'm just going to add one thing is I think a really lost art is stillness.
Sure.
We're just not, when you bring that word to people, stillness, because I remember as a kid, they used to say, you need to sit still. What as Dr. Phil says, well, we're not teaching them the stillness.
They tell us to, but they don't show us how.
Right. Show us how to be still.
Yeah, so those are the 3 big ones. And then movement. If you move your body physically, you will naturally find when the body for you, you're like a pumpkin. Like took you to a movie. By like 9 o'clock, I'm looking over and you don't have a chance.
No,
I don't care if it's a Ridley Scott's new Gladiator movie or a Denzel trying to win an Oscar. Like you're sawing logs, and
because now you put me in the dark and it's later and I've already moved my body. Yeah, I'm a pumpkin.
And by the way, there's 11 o'clock show. You have no chance to even make it to the end of the 6 o'clock show. So
yeah, no way.
I think movement is one of those things that. Again, you got to check the boxes. I said it earlier, and this is how I'm going to wrap up. This is a huge problem, and no medication is a good medication for sleep. Just so you know, it will not get you the quality sleep that you're naturally designed. So we got to ask better questions, but you have to be willing to change something. Back to the conversation I had with this gentleman. You've talked to him before. Hopefully he's realizing that he actually can control these numbers and these symptoms. But what he has to do is make some changes specifically to sleep. And that's the homework.
And I think as you're wrapping this up, create the hope that people can get a better night of sleep.
Oh yeah,
It's much more in their power that they can sleep better.
yeah. The reason we're not sleeping the way we should has very little to do with blue light blocking glasses and new mattresses. Yet all the money, resources, time, and energy is talking about, oh, I got to get those glasses, or I got to get a new mattress, or whatever. I got to get a new wearable.
Right.
You know,
Wearable.
here's how I'll teach you to sleep without those. I'm gonna take you camping. Your phone's gonna get damaged in the water, and we're just gonna it's gonna be cool at night, and you're gonna get 8 hours
And we're
of quality
chopping
sleep.
trees and digging holes all day.
Yeah, that's gonna help you improve sleep.
Yeah.
But the takeaway, the number one preventer of cancer of anything you can do is 8 hours of sleep. So I'm not sure why we wouldn't want to get 8 hours of sleep. There's so many reasons that sleep is the best investment we can make. So have a great Thanksgiving. We'll see you again next time.